So at this point, I'm going to introduce our individuals who have come forward to offer their perspectives related to MLD. And our first speaker is Kent Christopherson. Kent, we're looking forward to your 5 minutes of comments.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to participate in this public meeting. We truly appreciate the significant amount of work that ICER and its associates have conducted in such a short time to generate the comprehensive evidence report under discussion today. As the evidence report highlights, early onset metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD, is a devastating, relentlessly progressive, fatal disease, underscoring the need for access to disease-modifying therapies such as ICER. The significant impact of MLD on the health-related quality of life has been captured sufficiently by the revised utility value set represented in the current evidence report. Specifically, the MLD utility values demonstrate face validity as they align with other rare, progressive, severe disease analogs such as SMA and CLN2 that also have motor and neurocognitive pathology. The evidence report also reflects the caregiver burden increases as disease worsens. Consequently, caregiver disutilities in the evidence report have been appropriately updated to reflect this. The significant medical need for children with early onset MLD is primarily due to the age at which they're affected, how quickly they progress to permanent disability and death, and the fact that there are currently no approved effective disease-modifying treatment options for these children. As mentioned, and you heard in Grace's presentation, standard of care in the United States for late infantile and early juvenile subtypes of MLD is supportive care, consisting of medications, procedures to manage the symptoms of MLD and do not target or have an effect on the underlying cause of disease. This is demonstrated in the natural history cohort of early onset MLD patients, where late infantile patients progress by age 5, and all early juvenile patients progress by approximately age 10 to a state of complete loss of locomotion and trunk control or death. As you also heard from Grace, the outcomes of the natural history data are in stark contrast to the clinical trial data for ICER. For treated pre-symptomatic late infantile patients, 94% of those patients retain locomotion at last follow-up, as compared to none in the natural history cohort at the same age. In fact, all of these natural history patients have exhibited severe motor impairment or death. Furthermore, the longest follow-up of more than 12 years in the earliest ICER-treated pre-symptomatic late infantile patient extends well beyond the age at which nearly all corresponding natural history children have sadly passed away. Similarly, for pre-symptomatic early juvenile MLD patients treated with ICER, all surviving patients maintained mobility similar to their healthy peers and with cognitive function typical for age. Additionally, the longest follow-up in earliest ICER-treated pre-symptomatic early juvenile patient extends beyond the age at which nearly all corresponding natural history children have become severely disabled or sadly passed away. For the early symptomatic early juvenile MLD patients, in addition to slowing or stopping motor function decline, one of the key benefits to ICER treatment is the preservation of cognitive function. Even in patients who have incurred some motor dysfunction due to their early symptomatic status at the time of treatment. For example, although some treated patients have gross motor function that has stabilized, meaning that their functional status may involve the need for a wheelchair, these same patients have cognitive function typical for age, thereby allowing them to retain their independence, such as attend the school or university, as well as interact with peers. These ICER-treated children are all associated with better clinical outcomes than their corresponding natural history patient counterparts who have exhibited severe cognitive impairment. Finally, Orchard agrees with the revised assumptions around the long-term durability effect for patients classified as full and stable partial responders from the model. Hematopoietic stem cell gene therapy technology is a platform utilized by ICER specifically designed to result in long-term durability of efficacy. This is because the mechanism of action of ICER leverages the use of the patient's own autologous hematopoietic stem cells, ex vivo genetic correction of the self-renewing hematopoietic stem cell, the ability of these cells to permanently engraft into the patient, and the capacity of these cells to cross the blood-brain barrier and deliver therapeutic benefit by way of enzyme expression in the central and peripheral nervous system. Consequently, after successful and stable engraftment of ICER, restoration of ICER activity along with the persistent clinical benefit is expected. The ongoing follow-up for RCCL represents one of the longest follow-up periods in gene therapy clinical development, extending more than 12 years in the earliest treated patients. We believe that RCCL continues to provide favorable benefit-risk profile, with consequently significant value to the wider healthcare system as well as the MLD community. Thank you very much for your time today.
Ken, thank you very much for your in-depth and thorough comments in such a quick amount of time. Our next public speaker is Maria Kafalis, the founder of Cure MLD. Maria?
Thank you so much. I want to just say that my presentation will actually be the video presentation we provided to the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, in England, and I'm going to let your people take over the screen and present this testimony. Thank you. Children treated with gene therapy are not anything like untreated children. Children with this disease fall off a cliff within 90 days of symptom onset. The babies with the LIMLD form of the disease, the very aggressive form of the disease, we call it the cliff. They fall off a cliff. They lose everything in 90 days. But the children who have been treated with gene therapy, I have witnessed them throw footballs and sing and dance and hug their parents and play video games and eat macaroni and pizza and hot dogs and lead remarkably normal lives.
My name is Laura Adang. I'm a child neurologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and an expert in metachromatic leukodystrophy. Today, it is my pleasure to have a conversation with various families that have been affected by metachromatic leukodystrophy, many of whom were able to receive the transformational gene therapy. Do you perceive your treated child to have a good quality of life?
Both of my children, Giovanni, who's 11, and Cecilia, who is 7, are fully physically and mentally able to carry on life as their 11 and 7-year-old peers. Cecilia is a triplet and has 2 brothers who are her age, and if anything, she is advanced ahead of her brothers in her physical and mental capabilities. Giovanni is an extraordinary 11-year-old. He's a future leader and entrepreneur. I can look ahead and think of his future and where he's going to go.
Both the children are in mainstream school. They have an amazing group of friends that you wouldn't be able to tell that there was anything different to any of them. You know, to see them running into school is just amazing. They're always proud of all the achievements they make. They're proud of themselves, but they're also proud of each other. They're both currently obsessed with The Greatest Showman and are always singing it at the top of their lungs. And yeah, just I couldn't be more proud of both of them.
Right now, we are watching our daughter Ella make blankets for a scholarship for our school. And we watch Eli play basketball in the pool with his brothers, and he wrestles with his brothers, and Eli writes movie reviews for everyone who likes Adam Sandler. And this is all 9 years after being diagnosed with MLD.
My son is 6.5 years post-transplant. He was treated in December 2014. He is in full-time mainstream education and he doesn't require any additional support. He carries out the same activities and completes the same schoolwork as his friends and peers to the same standard. He takes part in after-school activities such as swimming and clubs. He is a typical 10-year-old child with the absolute best quality of life.
What does disease stability mean to you?
Our experience of the last 5 years, our older boy, Cahill, who was untreated for his condition, and having to watch him endure and suffer through the 4 years, really since he became symptomatic at 2 years of age, was excruciating for us to watch and for him to endure. So Kieran, having had his gene therapy ever since, he's thrived and he's been completely stable. All our follow-up checks have been really positive, and we have no reason to believe that he will get any worse. So we look forward to a full and happy life for him.
Thanks, Maria, for that presentation and an incredibly impactful movie. Are there any questions from our CTAF panelists for Maria?
Actually, Ralph, let me just jump in if you don't mind. This is more.
Go right ahead, Steve.
This is more of a comment. I really want to thank Maria for being with us throughout the day and for sharing this too. I actually kind of want to draw back to Dr. Christofferson's comments as well, in terms of lessons that we learn about how to think about conditions and the value of treatment. There's a tricky part to judging the value of a treatment when people are so ill like they are with this condition. And, you know, we use the term utilities in cost effectiveness research to stand for quality of life. But as Kung Ho presented, there are stages of this condition when it's so severe that the rating of the quality of life is below 0, which means that people from the outside looking at that saying that is, you know, fixing that, curing that would be worth, you know, so much that it's actually worse than being dead in some ways. And we just want to be really clear that that does not mean that any individual child, you know, that their life, you know, and their life within their family is somehow devalued or discounted. It's to point out that we have to think hard about the value of improving life from wherever it starts, and that can mean that we need to reflect that the excruciating, I think was the word used by the parent, the excruciating experience for the child that we imply by looking at their life and within the family. It's worth considering valuing that in the way that we did in this model. But I do want to point out that some others, for ethical reasons, would come to a different judgment that we should not ever rate somebody who is alive as having a negative utility. So this is one of the lessons that, you know, we need to continue to wrestle with as we come up with these wonderful treatments that can address conditions that are so severe.
Steve, may I respond to the disutility?
Yes, please.
I am a recovered economics major. My PhD is in sociology, and so I was very excited to see the use of the disutility metric. And I will say, as a parent to my daughter Cal, that she was a perfect human being, and every day with her was a joy. My enthusiasm for the use of disutility was to recognize that there were things that were worse than death, and that had nothing to do with her so much as this disease. And so one of the examples I'll use is that for 8 months, my daughter coded every morning. I cannot tell you the trauma of watching a 40-pound child code every day, and the trauma it had on my other children and the medical team who cared for her. So when you think about disutility, it is not about the patient so much as the disease burden and the cost. And the other thing I will add is that in her 12 years of life, 10 years living with this disease, we had 1,722 confirmed provider contacts, which just speaks to the cost and stress on the system of an untreated child. So I think that I'm very excited, and I enthusiastically hope that ICER will continue to use disutility as a concept. And I do think it does measure something that does not diminish the life of the patient. So thank you.
So Steve, thank you for the sensitivity of your perspective, but even more so, Maria, your comments in response. It says a lot about you as an individual. I will have to say that. So moving along, our next public speaker is Victoria Raspberry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I am the mother of two beautiful children, Addie and Oliver, with metachromatic leukodystrophy. As a parent, when your child is born, you dream about the future of your children's lives, such as the first day of school, prom, graduation, what their future careers will look like, who they will marry, their wedding day, and their future grandchildren. When Addie was born, I had all of these dreams for her, and her first year of life was blissful. She was incredibly smart, hitting milestones on time or before. She was walking, talking, showing us her sassy and funny personality, and then the monster that is MLD entered our lives. She began to fall when she was walking, something that she never had trouble with before. This began our 9-month odyssey to find out what was wrong with our baby girl. All the while, she was losing more and more of the milestones she had previously mastered. Countless specialist visits, MRIs, intensive physical therapy, and multiple wrong diagnoses. No one could tell me what was wrong. Not until the day after her second birthday, after the second MRI of her brain and the third MRI of her spine, our baby girl was dying. Not only that, but she would be trapped inside a body fighting against her at the age of 2, as she would continue to lose all of her abilities. I would no longer hear, "I love you" from my baby girl. She could no longer give us a hug or kiss us. The day that we first heard the words metachromatic leukodystrophy is the day all of our hopes and dreams for Addie shattered. Addie has always loved animals, especially big farm animals. When she was little, I used to believe she would be a vet for farm animals, but that is not her fate. Soon after diagnosis, she would begin to have seizures and would begin to have chronic respiratory failure. She struggles to breathe on a daily basis, has to use a ventilator, and has to have respiratory therapies every 4 hours. She has 24-hour nursing care and is a PICU baby. In fact, she is actually admitted today in the PICU, struggling to breathe. She cannot attend school. She will never go to prom or graduate. She will never be married, never have children, and never live to see her dream of becoming a vet come true. She will never get to fully live her life. She will live out her few short years here, trapped inside herself. Oliver, however, does not have that same fate. He was given a miracle, a chance to live his life. Oliver was tested right after birth, confirming the MLD diagnosis. At 6 months old, after raising $500,000, Oliver and I traveled to Italy, where he received OTL 200, or Livmeldi. Oliver's rebirthday, the day he was infused, was June 25th, 2021, when he was 8 months old. Oliver will be 3 in 22 days. He has shown absolutely no signs of regression. In fact, he has continued to flourish and thrive. Each day he is learning and gaining new words, new skills, new everything. He is not nonverbal. He is not tied down to machines, and he is able to do things we only dreamed of for Addie. We are not afraid to dream about Oliver's future. He will be starting school next month, and we are excited and dreaming about his first day of kindergarten, his elementary, middle, and high school years, about what extracurriculars he will engage in, his graduation, his prom, who he will marry, his future career, everything. Things we will never get to experience with Addie. Oliver will get to live his life in a way Addie never could. He is walking where Addie was immobile. He is talking and telling us "I love you," where Addie can only blink. He is exploring where we have to explore for Addie and convey our experiences. He is living the life of a child, not a patient. Over the last 4 years, the MLD community has gained 56 angels and counting. 56 children whose hopes and dreams will never come to fruition. 56 children that will never get to experience life. 56 families now lost without their loved one. This is Addie's future, but it is not Oliver's. My hope and dream is that other families do not have to suffer Addie's fate. Through newborn screening, babies can be diagnosed at birth, just like Oliver, and be granted the same life-changing therapy. Every MLD child should be afforded the opportunity to not just exist, but to live.
Thank you, Victoria, for your perspective as a parent of your two children and the effects of this disease on their life and the benefits of therapy. Really, thank you so much for being here. Any comment or question from a CTAF panel for Victoria? Jason?
I don't have a question so much as deep thank you to Victoria and to the moms and the dads who have joined us today, including on that amazing video. I think it's probably very hard to come into this setting to share these stories about your precious children. And I just want you to know how much we appreciate it. I want you to know how much these stories enrich and deepen our understanding of the comparative effectiveness of these therapies. And, I hope you understand that you have our deep gratitude.
Thanks, Jason. Our next speaker is going to be Amy Wright, another MLD parent. Amy, you're on.
Hi, good morning. My name is Amy Wright, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about my family's journey with metachromatic leukodystrophy, bone marrow transplant, and gene therapy. Specifically, I want to talk about my youngest son, Andrew Wright. I apologize for reading most of what I'm about to say to the panel today, but it's difficult to sum up 5 years in 5 short minutes. 5 years ago, late 2018, my world was shattered when I discovered that 2 of my 3 children had early juvenile MLD. John was 5 years old and the first to be diagnosed and was slightly ever so symptomatic. Anna was 4 and completely free of the disease, but sadly, Andrew was age 3 and tested positive for MLD as well. We moved very fast, and within days to weeks, both boys would end up being accepted rather quickly into clinical trials. Andrew would get gene therapy and John would get bone marrow transplant. At the age of 5, John received his bone marrow transplant here in the States, and about 3 months after that, Andrew got gene therapy in Italy. Both boys finished transplant and came home nearly about the same time in the summer of 2019. I don't want to go into how hard this was. Instead, I want to focus on the journey of Andrew, his treatment, where he is today, and very briefly compare that life to the life of John, so you can see how dire and important gene therapy is to families like mine. The gene therapy that Andrew received has been life-saving and life-changing for my family. Without it, I am certain of a few things. Andrew might not be alive today. Andrew could have went through a different treatment such as John and had a vastly different outcome. Andrew could be alive and in a very, very bad state. The difference between gene therapy and BMT I found to be vast, but I am not a medical professional and won't speak to you as though I am one. I found BMT, in my personal experience, to be harsher and riskier in actual treatment and recovery. But I will say John is doing exceptionally well, but he is certainly not doing as well as Andrew. My words to you today cannot begin to express how valuable gene therapy has been in saving Andrew's life. We were lucky that this clinical trial was going on and they accepted him. Had I not had access to this therapy, my son's life would have been destroyed. Through talks with other parents, it is not lost on me how lucky we are. Gene therapy for MLD is something many do not get the opportunity to have due to high costs and its limited access. Over the past 5 years, I've watched Andrew grow and develop as a normal boy would. You see, my first son, John, although he is doing great, continues to have symptoms and problems from the disease. His treatment was also, as I mentioned, harsher and more involved, and we have yet to determine any of the effects from bone marrow transplant. There are things MLD has taken from John, but not Andrew. Andrew has not only met all of his milestones, he exceeds some things in school. He plays soccer really well, basketball, and loves swimming. We have seen no decline in Andrew since gene therapy, and we have had 0 complications. Last night, I watched Andrew out on the field playing soccer, running, kicking the ball, and laughing and having fun, and not a day goes by that I don't think of MLD, especially when I see how my older boy John plays soccer, for a lack of better wording, much differently when compared to Andrew. Lastly, I want to say saving a child's life and saving their quality of life isn't something we should only be able to get. We shouldn't only be able to get if financially able to do so. Everyone should have access to this remarkable treatment and reimbursement for the costs involved to save their child from MLD. With MLD newborn screening on the horizon, every baby identified with MLD should have access to gene therapy, regardless of the form of MLD, since the disease is a continuum and it is hard to determine how soon damage is occurring in the brain before outward symptoms are even seen. I want to thank you for listening to my brief statement today, and I hope that it has had an impact on some of you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and being here, Amy. And I can tell you that your words had tremendous impact for me, and I'm sure the panelists. Any member of the panel want to ask a question or give Amy a comment at this time? Thanks again, Amy. Our last public speaker will be Dean Sir, President of MLD Foundation.
Yes, good morning. Sorry, I have an echo here. I don't know how to stop that. I'll ignore it. I apologize. Thank you for including MLD Foundation and myself in the process that has led to this evidence review document. Your responses have been transparent and very clear back to the issues that we and other experts have contributed. I'm an MLD dad. 2 of my 3 children have late juvenile MLD. We went through a 6-year diagnostic and misdiagnosis odyssey. We lost our youngest daughter, Darcy, at age 10, post bone marrow transplant in 1995. However, our daughter, Lindy, she has had no therapy. She's outlived the published, as back in 95, expectation of her dying in her early 20s. She is fully disabled and just celebrated her 43rd birthday in the ocean waves around Maui last week. We're blessed by this, but it also gives us firsthand knowledge that publications do not always tell the whole story of MLD. There's lots to learn. We've got over 2.5 decades of MLD family compassion and advocacy leadership here at the MLD Foundation, including 700 patients in our profile database, and we've personally met hundreds of those patients around the world. We've been actively engaged in clinical trials, newborn screening, and the focus of today's discussion, policy, which is the access and reimbursement to get patients treated. I want to share a couple of concerns about the process. Again, I think it's been clear and transparent, but the lack of direct engagement of long-term medical clinical, MLD clinical care experts who are arm's length from the therapy is kind of a gap, and I encourage you to be careful of that next time around with other disorders. How ICER decisions made today will be updated or refined as the data and market dynamics change. Additional research, off-label use results, and additional longevity established by the current patients. We're looking forward to the policy roundtable this afternoon. The scope and impact of ICER decisions. We're concerned about the use of qualities as a metric. PIPC has responded on that. I'll leave you to those remarks. Orchard Therapeutics, it should be noted, completed their BLA submission last month. And so March 18th next year is our PDUFA date. So the decisions that are made today will affect patients starting in 2024, right around the corner. We don't want any patients who might benefit from therapy to be excluded because of decisions made today. So I encourage you to deliberate with that in mind. Remember, the FDA controls the label, but it's after the label that the doctors and the payers control who gets therapy, and ICER has impact on that. I have history with Monte Carlo models. I didn't look into your actual models, but I trust they work as they designed. I appreciate the explanation. But those models are highly influenced by the data and assumptions you feed them. In particular, I wanted to highlight some comments in a moment about the stability. There are concerns about key assumptions that are made. Harms. 3 primary harms were identified. Short-term harms you identified as primarily due to the busulfan conditioning. There was a harm expressed about transplant may allow or accelerate progression during the time Arsa-cel takes over, quote. And early symptomatic late juveniles might not have perfect outcomes. Newborn screening, which has been scientifically proven to work very well, will identify all these patients prior to progression, eliminate early symptomatic children from the equation, and eliminate the accelerated progression period that you all are concerned about. With regard to the some of the future concerns about fertility and cancer, with all respect to the families, those children will be dead if they don't get access to the therapy. So we will address those trade-offs. I wanted to jump down to the equity discussion that came up about what are the males and the females and some of those sorts of issues. Today, those families have self-identified to either advocacy or the sponsor organization of the researchers. But when we get FDA approval and then at newborn screening, there will be a formal process to guide all of those families to therapy. So we will see those things leveling out when we get to that point. There was a comment that the early juvenile did not show as much benefit as the late infantile, and that was addressed in one of the panelists' questions. I'd encourage you to look at the early symptomatic early juveniles, and you can see that drop-off resolve itself. The ARSA activity level, you showed a 5 to 124x ARSA activity improvement, but since most late infantiles have near zero, it's not 25.8. So that part of the modeling does not demonstrate the extent of the gain. And actually, while the comparisons were to natural history, there wasn't a comparison made to carriers, and carriers often have 10 to 15% of the normal ARSA levels. So I want you to remember that without effective treatments, this comes from page 18 of your report, the early onset forms of MLD are devastating and rapidly fatal. What you decide this afternoon will have great impact, great positive impact, we hope, on families as we go forward.
Thanks, Dean, for your comments. Very astute. Are there any questions or comments from our CTAF panel for Dean or anyone at this time? Seeing none, I just want to make a comment on for all of our panelists here. We really greatly thank all the public comments we heard today. It really has personalized for us this incredibly tragic disease of metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD. ICER and CTAF always greatly appreciate our public speakers whose perspective on the disease under study adds so much for us panelists and the listening audience to enhance our understanding of the impact of a disease on the patient, their families, and their caregivers. MLD's devastating effects in the lives of the children and young adults and the marked life-altering ramifications for their families and caregivers is beyond heartbreaking. We appreciate also the comments about the impact of therapy and how that has affected families with MLD. So again, thanks so much for sharing your valuable perspectives with CTAF today. So Steve, I think we're going to break for lunch now. And yes. When would you like us to convene at 12:50 or
we have the time? It actually should be 12:50 Pacific, right? Yeah, 12:50. Yep. No, I think it's wrong. It is 11:50.
I mean 11:50 Pacific.
Yeah, 11:50 Pacific in the morning, 2:50 Pacific. Sorry, 2:50 Eastern. We'll come back, and I concur with all of your final comments as well in thanking the members who, the folks who came to give public comment. So everybody from the CTAF, please be back just a couple minutes before 11:50 a.m. Pacific time, when we will turn back to just a little bit more deliberation on the evidence. We'll take votes and then move through that into the policy roundtable. Thank you very much. We'll see you all back then.